The monotonous hum spread throughout the fuselage, pressing against Quentin's clogged ears. He despised those 25 minutes before the jump, the most protracted and excruciating anticipation of his life. The first 3 or 4 years were now a thing of the past, when every jump had brought him immense pleasure. The weekly routine had drained all the thrill out of it, and as he checked his gear, he imagined sinking his teeth into a juicy burger on the ground. The customers fell into a stupor, with the girls, as usual, being more animated than the guys. Men's sense of self-preservation fades after a few drinks. Sober, the initiators usually appear paler than their passions. The yellow light flickered to life, and Frankie immediately appeared at the door. As a jumpmaster, it was his job to instill a sense of confidence in his clients, so he buried the thoughts of repetitive jumps deep within himself, and outwardly displayed a willingness to throw people out of the plane by the scruff of their necks. The green signal flashed, and with a rush of wind and a piercing whistle, the open door beckoned. First one up. Frankie tapped Jackson on the shoulder, and the operator stepped into the blue abyss. Second one's up. Quentin turned on the camera and trained the lens on the customers, as they jumped one by one. Just when things seemed to be going smoothly, one of the ladies decided to imitate a crab, using her hands and feet to brace herself against the doorframe. But with a practiced move, Scotty sent her flying through the air. As the second operator, Quentin positioned himself at the rear of the paratroopers, last in line at the door. As he prepared to push off, he suddenly heard a piercing scream from the pilot's cabin. Frankie tried to grab his partner by the parachute, but the weight of the operator's body pulled them both into the aerial abyss, and they tumbled out together. The whistling in his ears, the bright sun, and the white expanse of clouds blinded Quentin. His breath was momentarily caught in the rush of oncoming air. He turned his back to the ground, trying to catch a glimpse of the plane. The aging Douglas DC-3 was moving rapidly forward, but then it made a sharp turn and rose rapidly, as if trying to escape from a mountain. Frankie bumped into Quentin and yelled in his ear. He saw something under the clouds, Quentin. Something. He saw something there. We need to catch up with the group and lead them away from this spot. Quentin tried to survey their surroundings, but they were already too close to the cloud layer to clearly see any breaks in it. 100 meters away, scattered among the stars, 7 clients descended while Jackson circled around them, taking pictures from every angle. Frankie accelerated toward them and caught up with the group, using hand signals to indicate a change in direction. The exhilarated but somewhat disoriented first-timers struggled to understand him. Lost in the thrill of the descent, Quentin approached the group, and simply grabbed one of the girls by the collar, and pulled her with him. With less than a minute of free-fall time left, they had to act quickly and decisively. Looking back, he saw his teammates following his lead, while the others sensed something was wrong, and began to move in their direction. As they quickly approached the clouds, the skydivers found themselves enveloped in fog for a few seconds, and then the roar of the plane sounded dangerously close above their heads, followed immediately by another sound that combined the screeching of birds, the rumbling of a giant stomach, and the rustling of a forest. The clouds abruptly dissipated, revealing a vast, colossal abyss, stretching beyond the horizon, littered with teeth. In the distance, a grinding sound echoed, and a long purple creature emerged from the clouds, the wings of its plane protruding from its mouth. The customers screamed in horror, snapping Quentin out of his trance. Behind them, the remaining skydivers descended from the clouds. Quentin watched their reactions to make sure he was still in his right mind. Each alternated between looking down and up at the monstrous worm, its colossal mouth wide open, hurtling toward its prey. One of the customers rubbed his eyes frantically, but judging by his expression, the scene below remained the same. "My God, what is this?" The client clung to Quentin, sobbing and screaming directly into his ear. Frankie and Jackson approached their teammate, exchanging puzzled glances. A short gurgling sound emanated from the abyss below, and they were all startled by a warm, foul-smelling gust of air. Disoriented, Quentin spun around, temporarily losing his spatial orientation. When the difference between up and down finally became clear, another smaller purple worm whizzed by just a few feet from him. A brief scream of horror, and the monster dove downward, parachutist's legs protruding from its gaping mouth. Motherfucker! The madness of the unfolding events engulfed Quentin, and as he increasingly believed it to be a terrible dream, he tried desperately to wake up. The abyss beneath his feet glistened and barely stirred, occasionally belching out dozens of new flying worms. They circled between his long teeth before scattering in all directions. Frankie snapped the mesmerized man out of his nightmare, simply grabbed his shoulder, and pointed in one direction. A roaring, smoke-belching plane plunged straight into the mob, entangled with the flying worms. The plane's long, mournful wail echoed off the pulsing walls, and its white silhouette disappeared into the abyss. Quentin felt his bladder give way, warmth spreading through his pants. Escape was impossible. Sooner or later, they would have to deploy their parachutes and slowly descend into the toothy abyss. Rough estimates suggested a 2 to 3 kilometer descent into the earth, adding about 7 minutes of parachute descent. But why prolong the inevitable? The gaping maw expelled another gust of air, accompanied by another swarm of worms. Quentin was thrown into the air, desperately trying to regain his balance, and in that moment, he found the glimmer of a solution. Turning to his companions, Quentin gestured for them to deploy their parachutes. Frankie waved his hand in the direction of the hovering worms, signaling his reluctance. But there was no choice. One of the customers pulled the ring, and instantly a colorful rectangle unfolded behind him. The others followed impatiently, leaving only Frankie to linger. When Quentin finally felt the taut straps encircling his body, Frankie's parachute whitened beneath his feet. A sudden gust of air lifted the skydivers and carried them into the clouds. Quentin struggled with the straps, doing his best to keep the chute from tangling. After a few moments in the fog, he was pushed above the clouds. Soon, 4 more figures appeared off to the side. Peering into the cloudy veil, Quentin waited for the others to join him. As the parachutes of 3 clients became visible, the straps of one of them became entangled with Jackson's parachute. The distraught customer frantically slashed at the tangled straps with a strap cutter. "Damn it," Quentin exclaimed. The reserve chutes were smaller, and it would take a lot of effort to reach the edge of the abyss below. If there was an edge at all. Finally, Frankie appeared, and right behind him, a giant worm emerged from the clouds. Quentin didn't even have time to scream, as his partner was swallowed by the monster. Its mouth covered Frankie's parachute, causing the monster to lose its bearings and zigzag uncontrollably. Suddenly, the flying worm came dangerously close to the tangled skydivers, and disaster struck. Barely brushing their parachutes with its tail, it dragged them both down with it. Their screams, mixed with the creatures, reached all ears. The clouds enveloped Quentin, before he could see a way out. Beneath his feet, the giant maw opened again. The number of flying worms between its teeth multiplied exponentially, swarming away in swarms. Thoughts of his fallen comrades and customers immediately vanished from his mind. Quentin's eyes fell on the distant fields, almost at the edge of the horizon, and he realized that it was probably impossible to reach them. As if to confirm his thoughts, a growl echoed behind him. He glanced up to see a miniature version of the gaping maw emerge from the ground and hurry toward him. Another worm flew in from the right, crossing his path, and Quentin did the only thing left to do. Pulling the cord, he released the reserve parachute, and his heart sank into emptiness once more. As he turned in midair, he saw the worms collide, their long, glistening bodies thrashing about. Disoriented, they tumbled down, following the parachutist. As he dangled helplessly in the air, he wished he had a revolver with a single bullet, instead of being at the mercy of these creatures. The ground below was swarming with them, and he mentally prayed for one thing: to fall before their teeth closed in on him. Just as another belch erupted from their mouths, Quentin was caught in a whirlwind. The fear of being devoured screamed within him, when suddenly, a glimmer of hope appeared. Upon closer inspection of a long, bright streak in the sky, a deep sense of satisfaction curled his lips into a vengeful smile. The worms below seethed and darted towards the white streak, swiftly hurtling straight into the creature's throat. Quentin felt for the spare parachute ring, and yanked it. It seemed he would have the best seat to witness the end of the world. The parachute straps tightened, and the man settled in for a more comfortable position. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The scorching wave of the nuclear explosion caught up to him simultaneously with the roaring flames and the agonizing death cry from millions of ravenous throats. If the parachutist's soul could have clung to the scattered ashes across the sky, which once constituted his body, it would have formed them into one colossal, indecent gesture.